Yeah, it's recording now.
Okay, so it seems to be live. Okay, hi everyone. Thank you so much for joining. This is going to be our first returning meeting that's going to be focused for technical calls. And the idea is that we're going to discuss everything that's related with architecture and technical stuff regarding MicroProfile. And the agenda item for today, we have two topics. Hopefully we're going to split the meeting between two. One is about the Jakarta rename from Javax, and the other one is the platform release compatibility that John bring on the last call. So my proposal actually is we start with that one because I think that Jakarta one might take us more time. So instead of trying to start with the other one and hopefully taking too much time on that, I probably would like to discuss this a little bit more, especially because we already have so much discussion on top of the Jakarta name rename. So I prefer to do the platform release first, and then hopefully we'll get back to the Jakarta namespace rename. Is that
Can,
okay?
can I also say, I think it makes sense. We can do the platform release. Also, we could box it, and also I think we should discuss the program plan so that people can start working on it, and then it's kind of maybe we can box this one and then talk the Jakarta namespace. I think the Jakarta
Yeah, I
namespace.
mean, let's give
Yeah,
like 20 minutes or
yeah,
15, 20 minutes, see how that goes. And if we
yeah.
don't get any much conclusion, we'll just jump to something else.
Okay, sounds
Um,
good.
So is
so
there,
John, yeah,
excuse me, is there a, I guess I'm signed in as MicroProfile. Sorry about that.
yeah, you are, no worries.
This is Kevin.
We recognize your voice.
Yep. So, is there an agenda or something that we're keeping
Yeah, so Emily linked
Let me
the
paste again. I think
let
you
me,
joined the, yeah.
so that one. So we're starting with a new technical discussion minute, so it doesn't get too complicated with the other one, so we can track things separately. So I'll try to. I'm going to try to do like John do with the other one and capture all the things happening over here. So I'll try to ask for help as well to capture things on this technical discussion. Anyway, so John, you're here. You were the one of the ones that brought the platform discussion forward. Would you like to give us an introduction on that?
Sure. Yeah. The reason I brought this up is because of the program plan discussion, and one of the issues that we have to resolve this year is branding and compatibility. And you can't really have compatibility if you don't have a spec to be compatible with. So up until MicroProfile 4, so the 3.x releases, we had a platform spec, but for various reasons, like the requirement to have a compatible implementation as a part of Jakarta, as a part of MicroProfile 4 in the spec process, we made it the marketing release. So we don't have a way for people to claim compatibility against MicroProfile 4 today. And one option we can do is create a 4.1 that defines a platform spec, and if we want to add in any incremental spec updates as a part of it. Or we can punt and wait until we resolve the other issues like the namespace, but we just don't know how long that's going to take. All right, so I'll leave it at that. It's just a means of expediency to deliver a compatibility kind of program as a part of MicroProfile.
Right. I think since I think Martin is on the call anyway. I think it's like a MicroProfile Health at least is trying to do a kind of release, and the other things kind of for the namespace and etc. It will take longer. Maybe we should have a June release, because we in this year we haven't had any release as yet. if we kind of plan for June release to have a 4.1 release and take in some other like spec update, etc., I think that makes sense.
So that requires two things I forgot to mention. So that kind of jogged my memory, Emily. First thing we have to have is a spec, which we kind of have, but is there anything else we want to add to it? The second thing we have to have is a compatible implementation.
Yeah.
Right. So just keep those two things in mind in order for us to deliver a 4.1.
So the other thing is the compatible implementation. Also, we need to have kind of continue the Google group conversation about compatible implementation. Do we like do we kind of force all the implementations to pass all of the Jakarta, that few Jakarta 4 plus 4 Jakarta EE TCKs plus the 8 MicroProfile TCKs. So I think we haven't reached a conclusion.
Well,
So
the point is it even possible? Because right now we are on Javax, right? And the platform defines Java E8, right? So
yeah, we are on Java. We are on Jakarta E8. So basically, it is possible. Like some spec, some like runtime. For example, OpenLiberty passed the Jakarta E8, like the other TCKs and plus MicroProfile or these 4.0 TCKs. So that kind of it will pass all of them. It will be certified against these implementations. So it's however for some other runtimes, if they don't implement the full pass the full Jakarta EE implementations Jakarta EE specs, and then it's quite difficult.
yeah, no, my first question was actually, and this is probably for John. Do you know? So do we have defined that on the platform that we are Jakarta or Java? Because that's different, right? Because if you're saying that's only because before we were like Java EE8, right? And I know that we made the changes on the dependencies to move to the Jakarta binaries. So I'm assuming that on the platform it's already changed to Jakarta. But if on the platform you still specify this as Javax and Java E8, then the TCKs are not even available for some implementations to run, right? Because they're not part of the clips on Java.
Jakarta
Yeah, I
EE
mean, I
is
would
available.
assume it was Jakarta.
Yeah.
But go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just trying to make sure. I'm just trying to make sure that on the platform we already changed that to be Jakarta instead of Java E8.
Yeah, we already changed. That's 4.0 aligned with Jakarta E8.
Okay.
Yes.
So that leaves the other question, right? So and that was one of the things that was being discussed on the group, and I brought that point up, which is right now the way that the TCKs for the Jakarta part are laid out, it is impossible for MicroProfile only implementation to pass those TCKs.
So I think it's a kind of I know I kind of suggest is one thing like maybe there's a 2 levels compatible, kind of 2 level compatible. One level is the MicroProfile level compatible. The other one is the full compatible. So basically, it's like we put some runtime under MicroProfile compatible if they don't have the capability or don't have the full support for the Jakarta, like all the pass all the TCKs and etc. And then it's for the spec for the runtime such as Liberty and Payara, you can put in another category or Wildfly and Wildfly. So in this case, we try to incorporate all of the runtime support MicroProfile.
But do we need to give it another name? Because we can just say MicroProfile compatibility is those 8 specs, and if the same runtime is also Jakarta compliant, then you know that those 4 others are also covered.
Right.
Right. That's what I was thinking too.
But the thing is that changes the meaning of the compatible. So it's
Why?
Well,
we
the
say
brand is MicroProfile compatible. The brand is not Jakarta EE compatible.
Right.
so. However, MicroProfile for all compatible. So because MicroProfile for all include the Jakarta as CDI and etc. Right? When we release, we include all of this.
Yeah, but there's
Package them.
there's nothing stopping someone from also shipping a JVM and having compatibility requirements there too. It's outside the scope of what we need to worry about.
Because indeed it is very difficult to run those for TCKs. And even if you have then only the CDI TTCK and there are a few tests around EEGBs, then those will always fail. So you can only pass that CDI TCK if you're a full Jakarta EE runtime. So there is no point in running them. And I should not give it another name because it always leaks through that CDI. So if someone tries to use CDI, the other options of CDI with MicroProfile, then it might fail if it's not entirely implemented. So it is either a Jakarta one or it is a Jakarta plus MicroProfile one, or it is a MicroProfile one.
Yeah, and CDI has other issues, right? It's not only about the HAB, it's also request scope that we don't support, expression language as well. So there are a bunch of other things that we don't support in CDI that are going to fail.
Yeah,
Right.
I was gonna say, raise the same point that, you know, like in JAX-RS, for example, there are tests that throughout the whole EETCK, there are a lot of integration tests that say, okay, this spec needs to integrate with that spec and that spec needs to integrate with that spec. And we don't include all of those specs, as you were saying, Roberto. So for us to actually say you have to pass the JAX-RS TCK would really require us to go kind of test by test and make sure that they're not leveraging anything outside of the specs that we've defined. It would require work on our part to create basically, these are the lists that you have to pass, and these are the lists of tests that you are free from passing. You don't have to, they're in our exclude list. I mean, we had to basically make our own exclude list for all the suites.
Right. So I literally bring up this is because last year we did have a vote, like what it does mean for the compatible implementation for MicroProfile, and the voting result is passed all of the MicroProfile specifications. This 8 and plus the 4 Jakarta EE specifications. So that's why I come up with that proposal.
Yeah, but you still have then a distinction, and you can say that a application that runs on a Jakarta one plus MicroProfile one might not run on a MicroProfile only certified one because you are using Jakarta things, and vice versa. It will always work, or it should always work, especially for the MicroProfile based things, of course.
So, one thing that I think we're probably stumbling on, if we remember the very first MicroProfile 1.0 content, all that was in there was Java EE specs. So it's kind of like that's been the baseline for Jakarta or for MicroProfile since day one. And so I think this is what Emily is getting at, is that now we're trying to separate the two, and maybe that is something that we should be looking at, and saying, well, maybe these Jakarta EE specs, maybe they are just a dependency now and they aren't part of the whole platform. But as it's currently defined, they are defined as part of the platform. It was MicroProfile 1.0. And why are we not requiring passing of those TCKs?
We could, but we would need to make our own exclude lists for all of those TCKs.
Oh,
That would
I
take-
understand, but I think that's what Emily is getting at.
Yeah.
You know, it's like we're changing the definition of MicroProfile, and maybe that's the thing that we ought to be looking at, is saying, okay, now that we have the two separate groups, you know, and maybe we just indicate those are dependencies and they aren't part of the MicroProfile platform.
The other thing I would suggest is if you need, if the spec itself is somehow defining too much, you should ask the spec to make a profile that works for you, right? I don't think you can go create independent lists and then say that you're, you know, in this case, Jakarta REST certified, you know. So if there are, you know, if you need a profile, then should work with the team that owns the spec to create it.
Yeah, and that's kind of along the lines of what CDI is doing. You know, they're trying to redefine their content a little bit, and then we're looking at the idea of a core profile. You know, so there's things happening on the Jakarta side, but you know, that's not going to be done for a while.
Yeah.
So
I don't have a problem with the spirit of the requirement. You know, reality is that it would take a while for us to get there because we've subsetted things so much. And the tests are interrelated and include things that we don't pull in.
Well, I understand what Kevin was saying, but I also believe that one of the spirits of MicroProfile was also to be able to bring in possibly new implementations that don't really require to implement all of the Jakarta stuff, right? And they could be they only should implement what they require for MicroProfile, plus the other subsets of Jakarta, right? So that will give you a more smaller implementation or a smaller server that will be like a low barrier entry to have something that could run applications, right? And the issue with this is if like a new vendor likes to come in and like to implement something like around those lines, they will require to implement a bunch of stuff that they don't really require, right? So
This is wrong.
This is wrong. Why is wrong?
This is wrong because you just said that we require, we can have implementation, we just require a subset and we will certify it somehow, right? So basically, this is not going to be certified because certification works only if you pass all the tests, right? If you don't pass some tests, this is not certified. If you want to certify it, you will need to make another specification, which is a subset, and certify on that, right? So defining multiple certification for every single specification, it's kind of, I don't know, it's just sounds bad. It's certified or not certified, it's black and white. And what you're talking about, I think this is what the Jakarta core profile is going to be, right? So this is where we are trying to make some smaller stuff, right? Maybe we will need to make profiles for some specific specifications if it's needed. When CDI Lite comes, we need to think about that because now I actually don't know what can we subset, can we split into profiles, right? But certifying on the subset, for me, this idea sounds totally wrong.
Yeah, so I think it's a kind of we twist the meaning of the certification.
Well, but there's two clear boundaries. There's the MicroProfile TCKs, and then there's the not separable Jakarta TCKs that in fact overreach their specification boundaries with respect to containers. So I mean, that's the situation we're in. So I mean, as I said on your proposal, Emily, to me, there's two logical levels of certification. One is you are just passing the MicroProfile TCK. The other is you're passing effectively the web profile or some other higher level thing, because that's basically what's required. And until we have a core profile, there really is no in between.
Yeah, I agree. So it's like at the moment, before we have a core profile, the only way is pass more. Yeah, is because there's no just enough TCKs available for the runtime to run against.
Yeah,
well,
I don't necessarily see it. I see the core profile being a good thing, but I think we should think bigger than MicroProfile in this sense. You know, there are many other community. Well, geez, what I'm going on is not a MicroProfile topic. All right. Well, what I was going to say is that there are a lot of other people who use the Jakarta component specifications, like Spring Community, who will also have this issue, and we should make tests available for them. And if that means disconnecting some of the integrations between other APIs, okay, now I'll close that lid, but because that's a Jakarta thing. On the MicroProfile side of the fence, you know, the release cycle that we go through is disconnected from the Jakarta EE release cycle in some regard. Like if we decide that in MicroProfile 6, we want to include bean validation, and that's not in the core profile, that shouldn't stop us from including bean validation.
No, so but the transitive question is, what's the implication in terms of certification relative to that specification's implementation? That's the primary problem that we're having, is that bean validation would actually be fine because it's a separable TCK, but in general, that's not the case.
Right.
So when I am looking at this issue, I'm always thinking that we still have 8 specs with separated TCKs in MicroProfile, which are using some parts of CDI, JAX-RS, etc. of the specs that we are using. So why cannot we just say that if you pass these 8 TCKs, that you are implementing enough of Jakarta to certify MicroProfile?
The reason is, you know, we have a MicroProfile platform release. In our release, we packaged all of the kind of the Jakarta, all of the kind of MicroProfile, these 8 spec APIs together with these 4 Jakarta specs APIs. So it's basically whoever uses this MicroProfile for the all, they are free to use this like JAX-RS, all the APIs, CDI APIs, and then you they don't know some runtime actually does not implement all of them. They will say, okay, I use this API, it doesn't work, but we distribute this API, so that's why we need to guarantee what we distribute should work. Or if someone some runtime claim for the compatible implementation, they should make sure these APIs can work.
Yeah, but that's the crux of the disagreement, is whether or not the TCK should have a transitive TCK relative to the Jakarta things. I mean, you can extend this argument all the way to the certified Java SE runtime, which frankly is not a requirement. There are many non-Java SE compatible cloud environments, especially when you're getting down to serverless, that can still make use of this functionality. I mean,
this is no transitive dependency. This is a kind of direct dependency. If you look at umbrellas,
if I was going to create a native API that actually only included the content that was being used, there's no way that would pass. You know, an application that used every single API in MicroProfile and just include those features, that wouldn't be able to pass the Jakarta TCK, because those features simply are not used. You have to be going into Jakarta specific functionality and make use of those APIs that aren't being hit by the MicroProfile TCK.
No, it's not about MicroProfile TCK. It's about the MicroProfile repackaged Jakarta APIs and distributed.
Okay,
so basically,
it's the issue of what does that mean?
It means is kind of the if you import MicroProfile for POM, immediately you can use all of the JAX-RS APIs, CDI APIs. So
Okay,
basically, it's not a transitive; it's direct export all of these APIs.
Okay, again, that's the crux of the disagreement. That's your definition. I don't agree with it.
But I don't. Are people even using or bomb? Because I think that was discontinued and we're not even using that anymore. But anyway, just doing like a quick time check here. We're almost half an hour, so I'm gonna give a couple more minutes over this and probably try to move something else. But I would like to leave this question because I like to go one step back, and this basically resumes into something which I believe it is. Do we want to implementations that basically what we're talking over here is only implementations that support the entire Jakarta spec can be compliant to MicroProfile as a definition that we're discussing right here? Is this something that we want to move forward? Is this something, so basically we're only gonna allow for full compliant or at least web profile compliant Jakarta implementations to comply to claim compatibility with MicroProfile?
I think we are still in disagreement, so I think maybe can further.
Well, this is just a question because basically,
Yeah.
if you're saying because basically on your definition, then it will mean that only those implementations are able to claim compatibility, right?
That's exactly the thing. So if we
Mhm.
have Jakarta specs in the platform, implementation compliant with the platform must pass these TCKs. I mean, if Jakarta API is in the platform, if you exclude them from the platform and says MicroProfile is these and Jakarta is somewhere else, right? So they are not a part of the platform. In this case, it's not required, right? So implementation must pass all TCKs for all APIs which are in the platform. That's it. So JAX-RS CDI in the platform must pass the TCK. It's out of the platform. It's not required to pass the TCK.
Exactly.
Yeah.
My perspective on it is these things are in the platform. They've always been in the platform and they're still in the platform. However, is a pragmatically, we can't really require them to pass the TCKs currently because there are tests in there that link into APIs that are not included in the MicroProfile. And, so I agree it's a good goal, but we wouldn't be able to enforce that policy day one. We would have to evolve towards it. That's my pragmatic perspective.
Yeah, I agree that we need to evolve it. We need to work with that project to make that possible, right? But if you ask me what the solution for now, I don't know, because not requiring passing TCKs for these specs, it's not called certification. It's kind of half certified or some kind of, there was difficult certification for testing, like Java certified programmer or whatever. And there was some internet testing, right? Then you go to the website, answer some questions, and hey, you have certificate, right? So if we do full testing, it's option number one. And this website testing, if we don't have a strict rules, if we exclude some APIs from the testing and so on, right? It's not proper certification. That's what I'm trying to say.
Sure, but let me just add something else then. So I completely agree with everyone is saying on that regard, but on the other hand, we see that on MicroProfile, we kind of respec things when we're saying, oh, we don't support conversation scope, or we don't support AJBs, or we don't support expression language. So that meaning that you're running a TCK where we're actually testing against those things, but we don't have a TCK that doesn't test against those things. So meaning that everyone that's actually testing with the right TCK is not testing without those things, if you know what I mean, right? So it kind of like you're certifying against something that we don't even define, or we are defining with that doesn't really define yet because the spec doesn't exist where those things are not there.
Yeah, and there are actually platform tests for Jakarta and standalone tests, right? Standalone, it means that then the spec works without the platform, standalone, right? And this is what we have to require. We have to require passing at least standalone tests.
Yeah, but for instance,
right?
if you look, MicroProfile says conversation scope is not supported, right? And conversation scope is part of the CDI spec. So meaning that you're changing the spec to be able to support CDI and MicroProfile.
Is that conversation scope a part of standalone CDI tests? I can't believe that because conversation scope is a part of the
I don't know. I'm not exactly sure I'm not exactly sure where it's implemented on the TCK side, but I'm pretty sure it's part of the CDI spec because it's an annotation on the CDI API.
There is CDI SE and CDI EE profiles, right? So is it a part of CDI SE profile?
Is not part of the CDI SE profile, but the point is you're using part of the E part as well.
I don't think so. I think MicroProfile is based on SE only.
Oh no, MicroProfile based on the whole CDI. So
at
the moment,
CDI.
Yeah, at the moment,
in this case, we are in trouble.
Yeah, there really isn't a profile in CDI. That's part of the thing that they're doing in CDI Lite is separating out.
Yeah, that's the entire discussion.
So at the moment, just separating out like define the core CDI. However, I think we are doing loops. Kind of
the fact of the matter is, if we wanted to put the rule in today, you have to pass these TCKs. We know for a fact it wouldn't be possible. You know, so the only pragmatic perspective is this a direction we want to go in eventually, and then we make for allowances in the meantime, and then we work over the course of the next months or years to get these TCKs that we would need to be more independent, to contain the things that we need. You know, we're not in a position where we could just make this rule now, like you have to pass these tests, because that's not our reality.
Right. So maybe for the time being, we don't see the compatible implementations, just the MicroProfile level implementations, just move on. So we avoid the word compatible. And we don't really twist the meaning compatible, and then because we don't have the TCK, the just enough TCK to comply with.
But on the other hand, Emily, there are implementations which actually use implementations for specs, which are actually passing the platform TCKs, right? For Yara, for instance, right? I think Tommy tried to, or maybe not, don't know, right?
Yeah, so 99% of the way there, but not 100%.
Yeah,
right. So, but they are. What I'm trying to say that there are cases there implementations fully compatible with Jakarta specs are used, right?
Yes.
So, is it not the case? We don't want to consider that the proper implementation, compatible implementation.
So it's so this is kind of what I'm also trying. Mentioned in the mailing list. I said okay, for example, Payara and Open Liberty and Wildfly, they passed the full Jakarta and plus MicroProfile. They are full. They are kind of compatible implementations. For other runtime, unfortunately, we don't have just enough TCK to run against, and they are kind of MicroProfile level, compatible implementation. Basically, we just
in this case we have two scenarios, like full compatibility, right? Means that it's MicroProfile specs plus Jakarta, and we have a partial compatibility. And this is what someone talked before. It means that compatible only with MicroProfile specs, and Jakarta specs, JAX-RS, CDI, not tested, we don't know.
Yeah. This is I'm comfortable with.
Yeah,
John
but
and,
I think
and Kevin, what do you
Kevin
think
just
about
left.
this? Oh, he
Kevin
left.
just-
Yeah.
John,
I
are
think
you
Yeah,
on?
Kevin dropped off. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't like the words full and partial.
Yeah, me either. I just wanted to get that in there so we didn't end with like agreement.
Yeah,
I don't agree.
conceptually, I think that's probably okay, right? Having MP compatibility and I don't know, MP plus EE compatibility, however we phrase it, but
I don't think we need to phrase it because there is already a certification mark for Jakarta EE compatibility. So, a product can say, a product can
That's a good
have the
point.
MicroProfile compatible logo on it, or it can have the MicroProfile and the Jakarta EE compatible logo on it. And I think the industry can understand that.
No, this is not true, because implementation like Helidon, for instance, it's not implementing full Jakarta profile. We are not Jakarta platform implementation. We are implementing
Right.
some of the specs required by MicroProfile.
So you would have the MicroProfile certification logo on you, and you would not have the Jakarta EE compatible logo on you, and the market
This is
would
exactly what I
understand.
don't want, because implementations we are using in Helidon are actually fully certified with Jakarta, right? We are not compatible with Jakarta platform, but implementations we use are absolutely fine and passing TCKs, right? So I think that it should be MicroProfile and MicroProfile plus, I don't know, plus Jakarta or wherever, right? And
Yeah,
it's not
Okay,
automatic.
so I think we should close this topic right now because it's taking too much long. I think we got into a conclusion where most people will be comfortable by having a MicroProfile compatible, a MicroProfile Jakarta compatible. Now it's only a matter of defining how is that going to look like, right? And then we just have to try to have some way to express that everyone feels comfortable about it. Is that okay? And
Yeah,
we
I
can
think,
keep
I
discussing
don't
that on the
agree with
mailing
having
list.
two compatible profiles myself, and I heard John didn't either. So
maybe the next thing is a kind of go through working group vote or something like that.
Maybe
think we
we should
can-
just postpone this conversation to the next week, right?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean,
And-
I think we can probably write like a proposal on how this could work, and then have like a Google document where we have multiple options on, yeah, maybe like two profiles, one profile with Jakarta, specify it like that. So, and then we'll do like we usually do. So we discuss on the document, and we may come to a point where we'll vote one of the options, and that's it.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, let's take some time
Is-
and think about that. Prepare proposals, makes sense.
Yeah, I will volunteer start a Google Doc, and then like people can, all contribute, and then we can bring back to conversation and reward the wording for this 2-level proposal.
Okay, thanks, Amul.
No problem.
Okay, so
We did spend 40 minutes.
I mean, sure, it took a little bit longer, but I think it was a good conversation anyway. The next one is about, the other one that you want to bring up is the Jakarta namespace rename. So we had that.
Roberto, before we go to the other one, so are we in agreement like we are going to do a June release for the 4.0?
not necessarily, because I mean, we haven't completed this topic, and I don't think we have. I'm not sure if we're going to have enough time to actually deliver on a release. Keep in mind that we now have more process involved than in past releases, votes and so on.
Okay, that's fine. Then we continue the conversation next week.
Sure.
Oh, the next week will be in the not technical one. Will be the live hangout for the release. Okay.
Yeah, so we'd probably continue this in 2 weeks, is my
Yeah,
guess.
in 2 weeks. Yes.
Okay.
And in
But
the
we can
meantime,
do
let's hit the
everything
Google groups.
offline.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so for the Jakarta namespace we named, so we had that vote on the list. On the document, I posted like 2 links. So one is the initial alignment Google Drive that we wrote some time ago, plus the survey. So my proposal over here, because I'm pretty sure we're not going to get into a conclusion right now, but I was thinking that maybe we can exclude some of the options that we're discussing, right? And that will give us a smaller subset of things on to decide, right? Based on the discussions that we have and based on the survey that we conducted, right?
Right. Before we go deep in here, and then I just give you more kind of news regarding the kind of the experiment I volunteered to take a lead on about
Sure.
like the MicroProfile alignment with the Jakarta EE9. So I got one of my colleagues to do the experiment with me again on the the small right config. So basically, it used the Eclipse transformer. This is Tom Evans. Tom used the Eclipse transformer as I proposed, and he's able to get the kind of the small right config kind of transformed, and got it running against the Jakarta-fied version of the MicroProfile config. So that's kind of all run cleanly. So at the moment, kind of last week, he just got the the Jakarta config, all the Jakarta config TCK run together with the no Jakarta TCK. I'm talking rubbish. Small right config the test together with MicroProfile config TCKs run cleanly. So just purely using the Eclipse transformer. So that is achievable. So it's so with that experiment, and then it's supporting both namespace with one code base is achievable. Yeah.
Okay.
So it's just tidying the code up and etc. And then we'll propose a PR on the small right config.
Yeah, I just want to mention Pyara and Tommy have been doing that also, and I think Open Liberty does it as well, right?
Yeah. So basically, it's yeah. So we use what we have done in the Open Liberty, so that pretty much not much work at all to transform a small right config.
We're all supporting. Many of us are supporting both namespaces.
Yeah.
But anyway,
So,
that will only be achievable until you break the API or until you introduce some new API.
it's basically is achievable. So it's if we maintain that make sure these two code base the same. So it's basically
well, no, because if you want once you change the API, then you cannot do it anymore.
What do you mean once you change the API? Which API?
You mean change the Jakarta?
Yeah,
one?
once there is like any change on the Jakarta API, you cannot do that anymore.
Yes.
If there's a backwards incompatible change.
Yeah, my point over here. So basically, we're getting into the discussion about the dual support, right? And I'm wondering for how long we're gonna have to support this, right?
I think it's because we are talking about Jakarta EE9. So by the time we go to Jakarta EE10, probably the Java X is we can say we no longer support Java X. We should all move up to Jakarta namespace.
So on the Jakarta side of the fence, we don't support both namespaces. We just support the Jakarta namespace. And the implementations take care of the backwards compatibility issues. That seems to be the most pragmatic thing for us to do here. It does become kind of a mess if we, as a specification, support both namespaces. it seems to be more clean if we just say, hey, we're switching to Jakarta. Vendors can do whatever they want to support the, you know, to support backwards compatibility, but you have to at least support, you know, the Jakartans, the Jakarta versions of all the stuff that we're using. I mean, basically do the same thing that we're doing on the Jakarta side of the fence.
But the thing is, if we just say move everything to Jakarta namespace, and is some customers still on the JavaX, so they would like to get a new updates, right? From, for example, MicroProfile config. If we only make change on the Jakarta branch, and then they left behind, so they
but
Well,
basically
but
you're just
then-
postponing the problem
we
because at
just
some
dis-
point that will gonna have to happen.
Yeah, but I just said we just discussed how like literally 4 implementations are supporting both namespaces. So who's left behind?
no, what I mean is the customers. So basically, it's
Yeah, customers
what
use our
has
implementations. There's like 4 of us who support both namespaces, so they have 4 choices of implementation
but-
you would want to use.
But that's only for Jakarta EE9. The moment you switch to EE10, you cannot support both on the same runtime anymore.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
at
you're
that time we stop support JavaX. So what I mean is I think is what I mean is in the interim, I mean when we move up to Jakarta EE9, and I think is to make everybody happy. So if we support both JavaX and Jakarta namespace, so we can move forward, right? So at least use the Eclipse transformer and then passing the TCK is no problem. I think it's some vendors, they want to stay with JavaX. Yes, that's fine. Some vendors want to stay with Jakarta. That's fine as well. And then we can make the one kind of the cutoff when we consume Jakarta E10. Not consume, aligns. When we
Why we
align
can't do this cutoff
Jakarta E10.
now?
Yeah.
Instead of just confusing customers, let's just do it
Yeah,
now.
I mean,
Who wants to support JavaX? I don't know that anybody said that they didn't want to support I didn't hear anybody in the vote saying that they didn't want to move to the Jakarta namespace. They just wanted a better plan. So it seems like we should just do that. Just make a
sure.
good plan.
I'm wondering, I mean, why don't we look at what Jakarta did, right? So one of the things that Jakarta did, they made like a clean cut when they released Jakarta 9 with only the namespace change, and then they're planning a Jakarta 10 with new updates, right? And whoever wants to use JavaX, they'll be on Jakarta 8. Whoever wants to move to the new APIs, they move to Jakarta 9. And whoever wants to move with new stuff, they go to Jakarta 10. So why won't we do something similar, where we have MicroProfile 4 is aligned with Jakarta 8, MicroProfile 5 aligns with Jakarta 9 with only the rename space for Jakarta, and then MicroProfile 6 aligns with Jakarta 10. And there is a clean cut. Everyone that wants to support, if you want to stay on JavaX, you'll use MicroProfile 4 with Jakarta 8. If you want to use Jakarta namespace rename, you go to MicroProfile 5 and Jakarta 9, and you do new developments on the MicroProfile 6 with Jakarta 10. And you don't need all of these, at least from my perspective, you shouldn't need any dual branching or dual or Eclipse transformer or whatever, because everything's going to be on their own version. Everyone's going to be on their own thing. But if vendors still want to do that, they'll be free. But I think we should try to simplify.
Well, yeah, that's what I said. I mean, on the Jakarta side of the fence, there is no spec level, you must support backwards compatibility. There is a statement in the spec that says vendors can do it. And vendors in practice do it. So I don't necessarily see an issue.
So this is interesting. So I thought there's 2 camps. I mean, why want to just don't want to move up? If like everybody says, yeah, let's do the Jakarta no Jakarta MicroProfile 5, release MicroProfile 5 instead, like to align with the Jakarta EE9 and go with it.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, I
that-
mean, to complement David's words, I think that on the vote, no one said they didn't want to move. It's just that we didn't have, in my opinion, we didn't have a plan on how to move forward, right?
So basically, are you saying now is kind of if we just say we only support like Jakarta, basically it's cut off JavaX support, and then everybody is happy.
I mean, what I'm proposing is kind of like what happened with Jakarta, right? So they have done it that way, and some of you have participated on that. So why shouldn't we just follow the same principle?
I think this is what John was proposing originally, right? That cutoff idea, and you have my +1. I think it makes sense.
I would support it as well.
Dimitri, I believe that you even proposed that in the past, right? Like this.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah, I thought John's proposal is do another release before the supporting the Jakarta EE9. Anyway,
The justification for that is the program plan and trying to get to some definition of compatibility that we're trying to track this year, right? If these two things are incompatible, then we'll have to figure, because they're both kind of in the product program plan in one form or another, then we'll have to prioritize.
Oh, so you mean like people who are already good to go, we should allow them to claim some sort of certification this year before we implement the next version, which does the Jakarta namespace?
Well, what I was referring to is, we could do a 4.1, which solves the compatibility program plan issue. And another program plan issue is to release something this year, right? And if these things are mutually exclusive,
So just switch the Jakarta namespace.
One or the other, it may come to that, is all I'm saying. We'll have to decide which one we want to prioritize. So I'm just kind of addressing Emily's point.
Right. So on the program plan, it does say Jakarta EE9 alignment. so this year we need to align with Jakarta EE9.
Well, so on the Jakarta side, we did release 8 first, and then so people could begin claiming certification, and then we did the namespace switch, allowed people to claim certification on that, and then we started modifying the Jakarta namespace in 9.1. And so, if we follow the same playbook, that would mean that there would be a MicroProfile released this year under the JavaX namespace, which everyone's supporting, that would allow people to start claiming MicroProfile certification. We would issue out our release that supports the Jakarta namespace. Would be no changes in it. And after that release, we could start issuing changes. It could be in 5.1, it could be in 6, it could be in both, it doesn't matter. But that ultimately means that we're lined up to do at least 2 releases within the next 6 months, I'm guessing. One would be a 4.1 or some other release that allows a certification mark to be obtained with implementations as they are now, and then the namespace switch in a future, round of compatible implementations on that. Does that seem to make sense to people?
And now it kind of makes sense. On the other hand, we with Hilidon, for instance, we are planning to jump over 4, MicroProfile 4, and release MicroProfile 5 compatible version, right? Because 4 is kind of, it was a marketing release, right? And there are some things we don't agree with. It's not solid enough, right? So from my perspective, now, David, it makes sense what you say. So if Tommy is going to certify on 4.x and Payara is going to certify, and OpenLiberty is going to certify. I mean, other implementations. If they're going to certify in 4.x, then fine, we should do this thing, right? From my perspective, I don't think that we will certify in 4.x. We'll jump over it.
Well, Dimitri, I mean, to be able to certify, you'll still need a 4.1 to define what needs to be certified. And it, if there are any concerns that you might want to change, I mean, maybe that can be changed to 4.1. I'm not exactly sure what your concerns on that, and maybe you can certify on 4.1. That's where people are going to certify, right? With those changes or whatever changes you think that needs to be done for Alisan to be able to certify as well. Will that make sense to have those changes on 4.1? I'm not exactly sure what you expect, but maybe that can be worked out for that version.
I'll need to think about that, right? So I don't think that I'm ready to answer this question now.
Sure, just think about it and let us know. So the current proposal is we table. Well, I'm not sure if that's like the right word, but don't take me wrong. The idea is like we table the rename for now. We focus on 4.1 to be able to do the certification and compatible thing. And once we have that out, then we work on a 5.1 with the Jakarta rename. Of course, this can happen in parallel, but just
not
to have like a
5.1,
sequence
5.0.
of. Sorry?
You said 5.1. Did you mean 5.1? Did you mean 5.0?
Well, I think it should be a 5.1 because the rename should happen on the last MicroProfile version, right? So if 4.0 you're not able to certify against, why should you be? So I think it will be, I mean, this is just like a semantic versioning thing, but I think it will be confusing if you have a 4.1 and then 5.0 actually is the rename of 4.1. So I was just saying 5.1 to be aligned exactly with 4.1 as well.
Yeah, I can see that, but for me that would be illogical because I would be searching for where is the 5.0 version. So
right.
Yeah,
it can be a preference thing, but 5.0 I was also thinking why it was not.
Sure, I mean,
Yeah.
that can be a 5.0. I mean, that can be,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Forget
Yeah.
about versionings right now. Let's do a 4.1 to get the certification out of the way for people to be able to certify. And then we do another release. It may be like 5, whatever, but definitely not 4.
Right.
That has only the Jakarta rename. And then further updates are going to be on a MicroProfile 6.
Or they could be 5.1, 2, 3, 4. I mean,
Yeah.
the Jakarta side of the fence, we didn't take a hard rule that you couldn't make more changes in 9. We actually encouraged projects to, okay, if you want to do anything, go ahead. You know, we had a limited scope for 9.1, but we're like, if you want to do a 9.2, we can do a 9.2.
Yeah, I agree. I think let's just continue with our past release like a process. So basically, after the 4.1, maybe some spec make an update, and then 5.0 is kind of like align with Jakarta EE9 plus all of the kind of the other spec updates. So because that's kind of major version changes, so that's why we qualify to be 5.0. So that's fine, I think.
Yeah, it's fine. The only thing that I don't want to happen is to have a 5.0 that mixes, or whatever version, doesn't really matter, mixes spec API changes plus Jakarta rename at the same time.
Yeah, I agree. So whatever that first version is, you know, it's just a rename. Subsequent versions can have new functionality. They can even come out very quickly afterwards. They won't have the same version. They could have a different minor version, major
right.
version, just whatever.
Right. In this case, like, yeah, this is kind of, we could just release 4.1 and then straight afterwards, we can release 5.0. So basically, it's, if we make it really like stay close together, so that this will not burden spec projects have to fork, like put their update in a different branch. So this is a fine. Yeah, I think it is achievable. If we release 4.0 and straight after we release 5.0, and then we can add more updates.
Okay. So John, just we're almost out of time, or actually we're out of time. Just want to be like a final question. John, do you think this lines up with your strategy for 2021 then?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Does
Did
anyone
we-
else have any other comment
Did we-
before we close down the meeting for today? I
Did
think we
we
should
put-
keep working on this offline, of course. I think at least we already have a rough idea on where we want to move forward, and this is going to clear things up so we can try to focus on this strategy to make this work.
We need a plan review for both of these releases.
Sure.
That's our next step.
Yeah. So anyway, we will revisit our release like in 2 weeks' time. Our proposal 2 weeks' time, and then we can create a plan review.
Okay, and Roberto, can you summarize this on the next live hangout in a week?
Yeah,
Just be ready
I
to
already
summarize it.
took some notes from what we discussed today. I'm gonna have a look into the recording again to capture whatever I missed. But I think we should be good. Okay, so thank you so much for joining today, and we'll see each other in 1 week.
There's the steering committee call.
Oh yeah, so steering committee call.
But it's not a steering committee. It's just working group related garbage. We got the project goals like marketing and our all of our plan goals, right? So it's the program plan focused meeting.
Yeah, I got to put out a draft agenda for that and just get feedback on it to see what we need to cover.
Yes, that would be great.
You were going to say something, Ed? Sorry, I cut you off.
I was just reacting to the garbage modifier there. But anyway.
Okay, so
it's not a technical meeting.
Right.
Okay, so thank you so much for joining today. See you next week.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
Bye.
Bye.